Hello, welcome. Welcome to everybody. We're going to wait another minute or two to let people trickle in. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, welcome. Cool, I think I'm going to get started. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Great. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this ConNEX panel on women powering the future of clean energy. My name is Joy Larson. I'm director of the CalSEED program at New Energy Nexus, and I get to work with all of the women in this event in my day job, not just on the screen, but also behind the scenes. And I really appreciate the different perspectives that we're going to see on this panel. Today, we'll hear from founders at different stages of their startup journeys and who are advancing new technologies in different fields. Before we jump in, I'd like to take just a moment to introduce our organization. Next slide. New Energy Nexus is a global network of funds and accelerators supporting diverse clean energy entrepreneurs. In California, what that means is we're building programs that are specific to the needs of startups as they invent and grow and deploy their innovations. And you can see at the bottom of this slide, we have different programs that align with different stages of development that startups go through. When we select companies for our programs, we work to make that application process accessible and transparent so that people who have big ideas, but maybe not those traditional funding relationships, can still leverage opportunities. And we also ensure that the companies we support are building something that has measurable benefits to the economy, to environmental health, and for justice. One of the important ways that we do this is through our partnerships. And so today is a collaboration between New Energy Nexus and our longtime partners at Momentum. The facilitator that is joining us is from within our New Energy Nexus network at the Clean Fight. And we're also joined by a keynote speaker from the Women in Cleantech and Sustainability. It's a real honor to introduce Julie Busch, who is a founder herself. She's the president and founder of Product Rehab, and she also serves on the board of directors of Women in Cleantech and Sustainability. Julie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Joy. It's a total pleasure to be here. Just give a quick overview of Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability. We are on a mission to advance the role of women in growing the green economy. We aim to achieve that through 4 key objectives. Number 1 is to achieve gender parity in jobs, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Number 2, to build a diverse network of women and allies to provide equal access to everyone for resources, advocacy, and employment. Number 3 is to facilitate sustainable action in local communities, which we do through our chapter model, primarily in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, London, Europe, and soon to be other chapters in the United States. And then finally, to showcase the women in our community as the thought leaders that they are. As an example of our programming, 2 weeks ago today, this very moment, during San Francisco Climate Week, Amobia won the 2025 Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability Pitch Competition. Amobia is a startup on a mission to feed and fuel our world with clean ammonia. That was the winner among a field of 10 female-led startup competitors. You see Kristen Barrett, CEO and co-founder of Amobia, on the image on the screen. She gave a flawless pitch, professional, succinct, compelling, to the 4 VC judges and the live audience at Adobe in San Francisco. So organizations like Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, New Energy Nexus, and CalSEED work together to support diverse entrepreneurs in their clean tech journeys. So please check out Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability after this webinar, and I hope to see you at one of our virtual or in-person events. soon. So thank you very much, and over to you, Kula.
Thanks, Julie. And really, really excited to have WCS here and all of the partnerships represented. And congratulations to your pitch winner. I know it was a great thing at Climate Week. My name is Kula Addy, representing Momentum, an implementing partner with our friends at NEX in progressing clean energy entrepreneurship. Always excited to be a part of the ConNEX workshops. A little bit about Momentum. We are actually based in Sacramento, and we help our clients design, develop, and deploy different funding campaigns and advisory services that accelerate clean tech solutions. We've raised and implemented over 10 billion in funding through our core client services, and we continue moving innovation forward with our family of companies that you see here at the bottom: Fuse, Giraffe. When you think of funding, public funding, that is grants, but that's also incentives, tax rebates, and low carbon fuel standard credits, you name it, we have touched them all. So you can learn more about our work at buildmomentum.io. A couple of quick reminders about the workshop today. I see a couple of folks sharing where they're from in the chat. We've got some WCS representation. I see some of our CalSEED and CalTestBed companies. Shout out to you all. We encourage you to keep that up. Keep engaging in the chat. For questions, however, we do want to make sure we get those all answered by our panelists. So there is a Q&A box, specifically the box there at the bottom of your panel. Of course, we're here to build community, foster solutions, talk about how we can continue advancing women in clean tech. So let's maintain that spirit in the hour together today. And we will be recording this and sharing other resources with you after the webinar. Now, I am excited to introduce Julia Park from our friends at NEX on the East Coast. Julia is the program director of buildings at the Clean Fight New York. There, she leads a $10 million Empire Technology Prize and really critical initiatives for decarbonizing the built environment. So Julia, really excited to have you here. I'll turn it over to you.
Amazing. Thanks, Kula. As Kula mentioned, I'm Julia Park from the Clean Fight. I'm very excited to be moderating today's panel, Women Powering the Future of Clean Energy. In today's conversation, we'll dive into experiences of 3 incredible women entrepreneurs leading the way. And we're going to explore what leadership looks like, how to navigate funding and barriers, and end with talking about the power of mentorship. So to introduce our panelists, as you can see on the slide, first we have Cynthia Adams, CEO and co-founder of Pearl. We have Emily Dinino, CEO and founder of ThermoShade. And last but not least, we have Patricia McNeil, CEO and co-founder of Westwood Aerogel. Thank you all for being with us. So let's start with leadership. Each of you lead in a sector where women are really underrepresented. I feel like I'm at tables all the time that's filled with men. Yet you've all really carved out your unique, authentic path and success. So how do you embody and demonstrate the feminine side of leadership with confidence? Perhaps I'll start with you, Cynthia.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here today. It is a pleasure. I want to say that I think one of the most powerful expressions of feminine leadership is really in consensus building. In my experience, women leaders are often taking less of a top-down approach. We tend to listen to other voices in the room. We seek alignment. We want to make space for complexity. And that can take longer, and it can get messy. But it does build trust and it deepens your team's engagement, which can reduce turnover. And that has real value, especially when you're trying to build something enduring, essentially out of nothing. But that said, I've also led in more command style environments. I once founded and ran a general contracting company, and that is very militaristic, that line of business. Chains of command, little room for debate, safety is often an issue. But sometimes that's exactly what the business situation calls for. So even at Pearl, there are moments where speed and clarity and focus is called for, where that decisive authority is really needed, especially when you're still proving out your business model and the need for speed is really real. So I think that the trick is in knowing what the situation calls for, because leadership isn't static, it's adaptive. It's the real strength is not in bringing just a collaborative feminine style of leadership to your business. It's really building that awareness and emotional intelligence so that you can choose your approach and to hire people who align with the culture that you're trying to build. And I guess in some, I would say to other women entrepreneurs who are listening to this, that you shouldn't shy away from the nuance, lean into it. The ability to lead with empathy and decisiveness, it's not a contradiction. It's really a superpower.
I love that, Cynthia. I love that what you said about leadership not being static, but adaptive. And I saw a lot of nods throughout everything that you've said. Emily, would you like to build on that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I agree with everything Cynthia said. I think when I think about some women's superpowers, it is some of that more patient, informed decision making, and that ability to build consensus, because you do have the ability to look at everyone's perspectives, take in a lot of information, and decide what the best course of action is. And I think especially as an early stage startup, you are constantly getting advice and feedback from all these different people, and acknowledging that, understanding where that's coming from based on their past experiences or their uh, industry, and then trying to distill all of that down into what is really best for your company. Um, Cynthia's point, that takes time, and being able to sit with that and build from there, I think is a great skill. And I do agree that I think the goal is to be able to lead in those feminine ways while also adapting and understanding what might be needed in circumstances. I think as a founder, one thing that I've seen male founders be more comfortable with, that I am trying to actually embrace a bit more, is some of that more ability to project confidence and not having to be, I like to be very transparent. This is where we are now. This is what we can deliver right now. But when everyone in the room is used to hearing people say, well, we're going to do this, of course we can do that, we're getting there, you start to see that comparison. And if that's what you're being compared to, as women, we have to adapt and be able to frame our businesses in that way.
Definitely agree with what you just said. And I think it's such a balancing act of all these different situations and the context that we're put in as leaders. Patricia, what about you?
Yeah, thank you guys for having me here as well. And just kind of like echoing what my fellow panelists have said, it's kind of like you have to take it from that holistic, more like systematic approach. So there are moments when it's appropriate to like be transparent and have that like be receiving feedback, especially from your key team members. And you want to build a company where everyone feels like they have agency in and meaning in what they're doing, because I think that like people, they're definitely more engaged when they feel like they're building something that's going to have an impact. And I think that also helps to bring out the best in like each individual team member. But at the same time, sometimes as the leader especially, you got to make a judgment call too. So it's like if there's a fire in the room, everyone needs to go towards that door. We shouldn't necessarily have a discussion as to what door is the easiest way to get out of the fire. But just kind of like, I really like to think of it as leadership as like being able to see the entire system and being able to get that system to manage or to flow as smoothly as possible. So like seeing what the individual team members might need in order to perform do their maximum work.
Wonderful. I think it's really just an overall lesson on leadership, not just pertaining to femininity. And so I hope it's relevant for all the attendees in the room today. Moving on and shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about a major challenge that all of us face. And we know access to capital is often harder for women-led startups, whether it's due to bias or just existing networks or structures. Can you share insights about your own funding journey? And it could be given the current climate or just also in reflection of your previous experiences raising capital. Perhaps we'll start with you, Emily.
Great. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that this is a difficult fundraising environment. I'm sure everyone would agree with that. We have mostly been funded by non-dilutive capital to date. We're raising our pre-seed round right now. I would say that there's a couple barriers that are almost similar in some ways of being female founder, but then also being in climate at the moment and being in kind of an impact space and trying to find aligned investors who both believe in the mission of what you're doing and believe in you as a leader and that you can do this. And that takes different forms. But I think as female founders, there is that extra layer of diligence of trying to find people who really are a good match for that. We have had great success with government funding, particularly with the CalSEED program. It really does level that playing field of you don't need a warm intro. It doesn't matter who else has invested in you. It's really more objective and scored based on what you're putting forward at that moment and how that funding can be catalytic for you. And it has been huge for us. And I guess there's two more points. Is one that I think this does tie into the last question of that projecting overconfidence. I think that is most seen in fundraising when you are expected to be painting this grand picture and not as much in that realistic building trust point. I think that women do have the ability to really do both. But it's a tricky line. And I think that's tricky for any founder trying to build that relationship with VCs. And then also just we have found some wonderful female angel groups and investors who have been incredibly supportive and that we're really grateful to have in our current round.
Amazing. And I'm really glad that through CalSEED and other partners, you were able to find examples of kind of merit-based programs that are more mission aligned with female founders and climate tech overall. Patricia, I saw you nod. Would you like to add on Emily's messages?
Yeah, I mean, especially adding on to when you're thinking about like what kind of narrative you develop for the fundraising environment, because it's like very easy for that narrative to just spiral outside the scope of like what reality can actually hit, especially considering we're all building within climate tech spaces and these things, it's not like you can go from 0 to 100 without actually building out and validating things and making sure that what you're doing is actually having a positive impact. But at the same time, you need to be able to communicate a narrative with confidence that's going to be bringing somebody on board. And like the VC environment is so entirely based off of this idea of like narrative and the way that people perceive you and whether they perceive you're able to accomplish what you're doing. So there's also, in my mind, some balance between like almost like your reputation in a sense. It's like some of these VCs feel like they've been burned by climate tech, and it's just kind of like a mismatch between the expectations and what people are trying to accomplish. Which is something that I think that like we all resonate with in our daily lives, and we try and like balance how do you balance expectations with what you're communicating in a positive way.
Love that. Great advice for the founders in the room. And I definitely agree that it is very hard to do that balancing between being confident and being able to, confidently state that your projections are going to reach X targets, your product development will meet these timelines, but at the same time also to become a dependable person who sets the narrative in the right way and kind of meets those goals for your investors. And so these are all challenges that I think everyone resonates with. Cynthia, would love to hear from you, and also if you have any advice for women seeking funding in this room today.
Sure. I want to just pull on the thread of the idea that bluster oftentimes from the male gender reads as confidence, and from women it can come across as defensiveness. And so understanding how to project, that confidence, particularly with investors who, a lot of them have seen it all, right? Like everything costs more than you think it will, and it takes longer than you think it will. And if you're doing something genuinely new in business, you're putting your best guess out there. You're trying to back it up with data, but you don't really know. I mean, I think this pricing will work. Here's all the reasons why we think it'll work. I think my product is awesome, and here's why we think there's market demand. But, until you get what you're doing out into the wild, you're leading from that energy of confidence. But again, you don't really know. That's the fun and the fear of startup land. But here's a couple of things that I've learned. Like, if you come to the investor conversation with curiosity, you're likely to learn something about yourself and your business, even if it doesn't result in them writing a check. So it's very important to learn what the investor needs to know about your business, and to understand, what are their maybe some key points that they're looking for in business, whether that's revenue or traction. Oftentimes investors are looking to own a certain amount of company based upon a certain amount of investment. So they've got like a math box they're trying to put you in. And it's important to understand out the gate, am I trying to match a thesis? Am I matching a math box? Like, how does this investor even think or approach investing in a company in the first place? But again, if you're coming at the conversation with the right sort of attitude, you're likely to learn something that is useful to you. And the other piece of advice that I would say is that there's all of this emphasis in startup land about let's do pitch practice, and let's have a pitch contest. And so founders, you're crafting your story, you get that 10 minutes or that 20 minutes discovery call with an investor, and they nibble or they bite. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is the diligence. It's the questions that come after. So the other thing that I would say is practice more than your pitch. Write out all of the hard questions, the ones you don't want an answer. You don't want to answer because you don't have a good answer for them, and practice them. Get them as sharp and as crisp as you possibly can, because they're going to throw you off your stride. And having a mentor to work with them through, if you're in an accelerator, working with the mentors there, doing it with friends, colleagues, whatever. But I can't stress enough how important that is. I've gotten off investor calls before and just kicked myself, like, dang it, I should have seen that one coming. And I really wished I had a pithier answer for it. And I'm not going to get a do-over with that investor. So those are a few things I would say. And then lastly, this is the other one I was thinking about, and this might just be like behavior 101, but try to match the energy of the person on the other end of that line. Some investors are really thoughtful. They're kind of soft-spoken. They're going to probe on the numbers. And then you'll have the other ones that are more of what I call the investor bras. And, they're coming in with a lot of questions. They're going to interrupt you. They've seen it all before. They've got all this big energy, and you want to match that energy too. So kind of like what we were talking about with leadership styles, I think also your conversational style, your engagement style, you got to be able to bring up and down your level of energy and conviction kind of in response to what you're feeling from the other side of that screen or the table if you happen to be in person.
Such powerful advice. I really love, oh my gosh, all the points, but the superpower of really being able to lean into being able to listen and empathize with the energy in the room and match that, and being able to kind of understand, perhaps because we're not overconfident, the doubt that we have in our own minds, and being able to then turn that around, prepare for these hard questions and conversations to better prepare for whether it's VC meetings or grant opportunities, I think is really, really valuable. Great. I'm going to turn the conversation a little bit now from systems to more of a personal side. And so I know being a founder must be incredibly tough. But I'm hopeful that those moments are also catalysts for growth. And so would love to hear about perhaps a moment of challenge that you faced in your journey and how you were able to overcome it. And with this one, would love to start with you, Patricia.
Thank you. So I was thinking about this, and for me, at least, like two things come to mind. So, the company that I run, we're like a materials company. So then it's kind of like that, there's a dichotomy between the validation of the material, and then if you want to actually make a sale, suddenly you need like metric tons of the thing. And I'm like, whoa, that's a really big leap. We should have a conversation of how we're going to ramp up to that rather than just kind of be like, okay, you like it. I can't make a metric ton for you right now. How are we going to kind of like pull that together and make it such that we can actually like meet your need in an appropriate manner, not just kind of like in an over-promising kind of manner. And that's, for me at least, that's something that I've been trying to approach from like having a open conversation, especially with like the engineers that I interact with, and trying to look for checkpoints that aren't so like a step function in that. So you validated the material itself, but it's like, what does a smaller systems sized MVP look like? And how can we build those types of validation points that don't necessarily need to require me to have a minor factory online? And then the other thing that I find that I struggle with is when I start to have to ask customers for money, especially for validation scale products. So a lot of the narrative that I build is that we can make like the lightest insulation material on earth in a very cost-effective manner. So then if I turn around and I'm like, oh, can I have $500 for a few bottles of material? They kind of look at me like, wait a second, you just told me this other thing. And then it's but like at the same time, it's I end up explaining like at the moment and where we are now as a company, it's kind of a matter of you're paying for the time and the effort of the engineering team rather than the material itself. So it's like really trying to navigate what that conversation looks like so that you're not trying to burn a bridge, especially if it's a particularly big customer potentially, but you're not like giving it away for free at the same time, because that's not what we're trying to do as entrepreneurs.
No, I love that. And there are so many challenges that come with scaling very physical products. And I love that you emphasize the importance of striking the right balance between, sharing some of the risks, but also being, mindful of your own business and your bottom line. And so really appreciate that. Emily, what do you think are some of the challenges that you've also faced?
Yeah, so I'll talk about one big challenge in particular, which I think someone actually kind of touched on this in the chat, and a little bit differently, but challenges with interpersonal and team issues, I think can be so huge on such small teams. So when I started ThermoShade, I started it while I was in grad school. There were 4 of us, we were students. It started as kind of a student project. We graduated. There were 2 of us who then were mainly moving it forward for a little while. We also were working full-time jobs, and we were getting to that point where, like, okay, we have enough information now. We've took a year after grad school, like we're getting ready to move into this full time. And at the like early last year, my co-founder came to me and said, I just found out my wife is pregnant. I'm not going to be leaving my job with health insurance and paternity leave and all these things. I was like, okay, great, totally understand. But then it was just me, and that was scary because that was not the journey I had envisioned, not where I thought I would be. Working out those details of having him leaving and continuing forward were hard. And I think before joining a startup, people tell you like co-founder issues are such a big deal. And you kind of are like, yeah, but we're fine. And then something happens and it's all true. So listen to that. But I did end up being able to then ultimately bring on an incredible co-founder. It took a bit of time to find someone else. I was able to take a bit of time, sit back, really look at what the scale gaps and who I wanted to bring on. I think that was where I got to the how hard I took my old co-founder leaving and adjusting to that. I would say was one of the like I definitely was more emotional about that, but then my ability to really be patient and make a really good decision on who I brought on next, I think was leaning into the positive female leadership side. But yeah, co-founder stuff is hard, and I think it will impact more startups than you think.
Definitely. I think I saw some reaction emojis there, and looks like there are a lot of people who resonate with that. Thank you for being so open, because I think it is incredibly important to recognize challenges being that tough moment in time, right? But also really appreciate the positive angle that you led us on, which is that at the end of it all, it did kind of come out in a better outcome, and you were able to take that pause to really assess what would be the best strategic decision for your company. Great. And Cynthia, would love to hear from you on an example of challenges, how you move past it as well.
I think the greatest challenge that I have faced on my founder journey, without question, is work-life balance. When you're passionate about your business, your mind doesn't really clock out. It's circling back constantly, nights, evenings, weekends, during what's supposed to be your downtime. And if you don't find a way to recharge, you can risk burnout, bad decision-making, or worse, depression. And I haven't fully figured this out yet. I haven't taken a 2-week vacation since I started Pearl, and I'm not saying that with a note of pride. It's more with some frustration. But what I have found is that recovery doesn't always have to come in big chunks. What's helped me most is that I have this daily practice of taking a long walk. Usually, some people might call it a hike because it happens out in nature and it may involve a hill. It may also involve cussing into the wind, depending on the day. But the practice is really about being in the moment. It's about being in that presence so that I do get that mental break. So it's, what am I smelling? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? What is my breath like? Really tuning into that so that I can reconnect to why I'm doing this at all in the first place. And there definitely have been moments where I question my place in this world meaning like in this business world as an entrepreneur. Do I fit the right mold? But doing this daily practice has really helped me recenter, recharge, and then ultimately recommit. Because coming back to the knowledge that this is a choice that I'm making, I'm not like trapped in some lifestyle or like cage of my own making. You know, when things get tough, because this can be a grind sometimes. The psychological component of it is not to be underestimated. So that recommitting gives me that sense of freedom, you know, and I guess I would just end with protecting your energy and finding that work-life balance. It's not a luxury, it's actually a leadership skill. And the ability to stay clear, to have stamina, and to be grounded in your values. These are the things that carry you forward as an individual, and then also by extension carry forward your company.
I really love that. I think work-life balance is a challenge that all of us struggle with, but I love your way of taking these long walks to really kind of disconnect and take that pause and then come back with recharged energy. I think a lot of us in climate are in climate because we love nature, we love Earth, and we want to spend that time, but we are also stuck at our desks. And so that reminder to take that time for yourself is really appreciated. And I love that we somehow ended up with really great different examples of challenges across both business and personal. And so thank you for sharing those insights. Okay, and I guess moving on to our final topic of today, I would love to talk a little bit about mentorship and support. I think a lot of us, as we navigate this entire journey, this mentorship is something that can really change the game. And so would love to hear from you on how you've been supported by, other women colleagues in the industry, other founders, et cetera, throughout your journey, or other mentors in general. And this time I'll start with you, Cynthia.
I'm going to note that this question is a great sort of segue from my last answer, in that one of the most important women in my business career has been my executive coach, Perry Chickering. I've worked with her on and off for years, usually just for a few months at a time as I hit a friction point. But she was one of the folks early on that talked about how walking was important to my company, because it was giving me that mental space to come back recharged and with more energy and creativity. And she's written a book called Leadership Flow, The Unstoppable Power of Connection. I highly recommend it. She actually references our conversation and the importance of giving yourself permission to take that break in the book. But a coach is similar to a mentor. And if you're working with an executive coach, they may have executive experience and you can get that mentorship sprinkled in. But I think of mentorship as really good advice coming from someone who knows the ropes. And I think of a coach as someone who comes to you with questions that help you see yourself more clearly, can help you get unstuck and grow into the leader that you need to become. So like I said, if you're lucky, you can get a little bit of both in one human. But the other way in which I've found colleagues and other women to be helpful to me is that we seem to carry a shared sense of understanding of what we're up against. We've all been mansplained to. We've all been in rooms where we're one of the only women invited literally to the table, as you mentioned earlier. And yet there's this unspoken kind of solidarity. It might be in a knowing smile. It might be this moment of encouragement that passes between us. But that shared knowledge, it kind of plays into a sort of quiet determination to get things done. And I think also to pay it forward. So I would again kind of say some advice to other women out there who are thinking about this, like if you're struggling, get a coach. You don't have to spend money at all the time, but if you can get your business to pay for it, all the better. I think a coach is a really powerful force in a person's career. And second, make time, for women who lift you up. Have that coffee, do that video call, grab them for a drink if you're at a conference. Even a 30-minute conversation with another woman founder can be both grounding and energizing. And then the last thing, this is a small thing, but it matters. If you see another woman, or if you catch yourself apologizing for sharing your opinion or prefacing your contribution with some sort of self-doubt, I would say pull that person aside or have a conversation with yourself in your lonesome. We do not have to minimize ourselves in order to belong in the room. And I swear I see women do this all the time. I think maybe a quiet moment can help shift someone's confidence more than you realize. So mentorship, it's not just a role, it's like a ripple effect. And every time that we lift each other up and we come to conversations with generosity and honesty, we give other women permission to do the same.
I love that. That's such a powerful message. And I'm gonna dwell on that for a moment, but also love your tactical advice about, I think a lot of women are like, where can I find my mentor if I'm charting my new own path? And an executive coach is a great actionable, path for someone who is looking for advice and coaching. And so love that advice as well. Patricia, what do you think about mentorship and, any advice that you'd give?
So, for me, I feel like when I'm thinking about the people who've had a really positive impact and like a very positive mentoring impact, they've typically been people that I feel like I can come back to it at any time. So like they make themselves available potentially, but I like having a little bit more independence as well. So they've also been people who've given me kind of like the space to make my own mistakes, maybe not such terrible mistakes that I'm just going to completely regret it. They will insert their opinions every once in a while when it's obvious that I'm doing something that doesn't make sense. But for the most part, like it gives me a lot more confidence in my decision making because I know that these people have been available for me, but not like micromanaging my decision making. And mentorship is also something that like I enjoy doing potentially. So the first time that I had a mentee was like my first year in grad school. And at first I was kind of a little bit shocked because I was like, I just showed up here and you're already throwing someone at me. But at the same time, it was definitely made me more thoughtful as like a researcher and as a person because it's like I'm taking someone who's like extremely excited and motivated and trying to do for them what I found useful for me. So trying to create an environment where I'm like helping with their learning, but giving them the space to make the discoveries organically, which is not necessarily something that's easy to balance. And then a quick slight plug on this. So for my company, we're actually hiring for summer interns that are supposed to transition into a lab tech position, ideally. So if there's anyone in the audience, please shoot me an email. I'll pop my email in the chat and would also love to engage with you guys.
Love that plug. And I think there are parallels of, paying it forward, right? And internship is an example of that as well. But I really resonate with what you're saying about the lessons that you learn as being a mentor, as much as the benefits that you get from being a mentee yourself. And I think both sides of the table bring value to your own leadership styles. Great. Well, Emily, how about you? How do you view mentorship and supporting other women?
Yeah, I'll add that I can't imagine doing this journey without my female founder friends. Um, it makes such a difference to have someone that you can just share all your ideas with, share challenges with, feel comfortable texting, calling. You know, during like LA Climate Week, I was coordinating events with one of my friends, and like we were talking about grant programs we're applying to and something, and it's like, okay, do you have 30 minutes after this event? Because I actually really need to vent about something. Like we're just going through all these things, and it breaks up the day and gives you an opportunity to have a conversation that you need to have with someone who knows exactly what you're going through. It has been such a powerful network for me. I think being in LA, being part of the Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, being part of Lacey and Larda, given me this opportunity to meet some really incredible women who I've also found do really want to support and lift each other up. Everyone's telling each other what grants they're applying to, seeing if there are opportunities for us to do joint applications. There's a lot of momentum behind that, obviously we're all competitive people who want to do really well. I don't think you can really be a founder otherwise if you're not driven to succeed in what you're doing, but it's not a cutthroat environment, and those are the people who are really just get what you're going through. And I think too, I've found some really great support in female investors and people in the industry who go out of their way to also create those opportunities for networking and to make it known that they want to support you, even if you're not a fit for their service that they give to Fortune 500 companies right now, or if you're not a fit for their Series C fund, they want to guide you and help you. So it never hurts to ask. I've found people to be much more receptive than I would have thought.
I love that. And thank you for kind of bringing us full circle back to, the fundraising bit as well. It's like, yeah, you can find a support network in all places, right? It doesn't have to be a mentor or mentee. It could be peer groups, like you mentioned, or any of your business relationships. And so thank you everyone for your wonderful insight. I think now we're doing perfectly on time. We'll transition to questions from the audience. If there are things that are on your mind, please feel free to pop it in the chat. And I see questions rolling in right now. And so the first question that we received is, what advice would you give to women seeking funding or for breakthrough technologies in clean energy. And so I know we touched upon the challenges of raising, but is there general advice for people who are perhaps going through this in climate for the first time, etc.?
So I know that like for funding, some people have given me the advice that you're going to need to like talk to hundreds of people and maybe get like 10 turnovers, and it's like very sad statistics. I would probably honestly in this what we do more is really try and find more focused alignment. So like people who are more receptive to clean energy technologies, or people who have a better understanding of what it takes to build something that's not going to 10x in a year. It's obviously hyperbole. So, and I think like investors understand that's hyperbole at that point too. But yeah, just like being able to give a more targeted narrative to your particular audience rather than just trying to hit as many people as possible. It's also just less emotionally straining because you don't want to get 100 no's per like your one yes that you actually need.
I love that, being targeted in your approach. Emily, I know you talked about kind of going after the more non-dilutive funding opportunities. Would you have any insights to share from that experience?
Yeah, I'll share that. And I also just want to quickly add on what Patricia was saying. I think in particularly being in hardware or materials and being early stage, like there are aligned investors, but there aren't hundreds of them. There aren't so many people to just bosses out to. It is a more intentional process and relationship building. I have also found success in when the hardware climate tech company that just raised a pre-seed, I go look at who their investors are and who got in on that round. Then you at least know you've pre-qualified them that they're not going to just say no because it's hardware or it's climate. So I found that to be very helpful. And then with the non-dilutive, I think, coming at that from a couple different angles. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty right now at the federal level. But we had applied for a DOE grant this year. But we also with our technology can fit in with the USDA, and it's like, okay, maybe there'll be more opportunities there. I've talked to some people who are like, can I figure out a use case now with the military? Like, have to get a little more creative about maybe how you fit some of these mandates of these different federal agencies that are going to have more grant funding to give. But with, we've found really aligned funding opportunities within California, within New York, looking at some of these state-specific opportunities, looking at foundations that are looking to step up and fill some of those funding gaps now. There are definitely going to be other opportunities that continue to emerge as this new funding landscape kind of takes shape.
I think another thing that could be helpful, and I'm a software company, so I don't have that intensive factory or other related funding needs, infrastructure needs. That having been said, I have seen this before, that if there are funds out there that have limited partners who've put their money into the fund, and if there's a particular business partner, strategic partner that wouldn't do a strategic investment themselves, but because they're an LP in a fund, you can potentially get them to help make the introduction. Maybe you're doing a pilot with them or proof of concept. And that might be another way to find yourself into the right fund. So either find a good business partner that has a VC arm that does strategic investments, or if they can be a partner for you on a proof of concept, then it's likely that they're in one or more funds as an LP, and maybe that would be the VC to approach.
Amazing. Thank you so much for those insights. The next question is, speaking of mentorship, I heard that WCS has a mentorship program. When is that happening and how can I join? Is anyone able to comment on that?
I am able to comment on that. We do have a mentorship program. And typically it opens up in around October. We start making noise about it to take applications for both mentors and mentees. By the end of the year, we have reviewed all the applications and paired women up with each other. And then the program launches in January, and then it usually runs until April. So if anyone's interested on being a mentor or a mentee, you can just email like you can email me, or you can go to the website and just sign up. There's usually on the mentorship page an email address, and just say, hey, I want to be on the list.
Great. Given that we have 5 minutes left, I will perhaps have one person answer the next few questions. And so please feel free to take turns. The next question is directly from the chat. What is your methodology for finding pain points in your product and business? I think we talked about the source of funds a little bit already, so let's focus on the pain points. I'm sure all of you can share, but anyone burning to answer this question? You can also share about.
Can you repeat the question one more time? So
Yes.
Yeah.
The question is about how do you best identify the pain points around which you build your products? Is there any advice and tips for doing that kind of product development phase?
Talk to your customers, like a lot. Talk to more than one of them. Talk to a whole bunch of them. Yeah, I think the best way to understand, the pain points is to understand the market and the nuance of the decision-making process for the people that you want to purchase the thing that you're doing.
Love that. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question from Tanya from Community Energy Labs. Sometimes I notice that prospective employees and even just folks seeking mentorship have an expectation from me about how much emotional labor I must do with them. I have actually begun screening out candidates who express a strong fantasy that working for a female boss is somehow more like having a kind aunt than a boss. How do you handle this mismatch in terms of how much feelings work you have to do in business or business adjacent relationships? Wow, that's a very tough but really important question. I'd love to hear from anyone if you have any thoughts to share or even anecdotes.
So I'll say I've definitely been told that I'm too nice sometimes. And there's definitely a part of me that's kind of like maybe this is the point where I need to like reevaluate the expectations that I set in like the comment said, the amount of emotional energy that I'm putting into the relationship versus kind of like what this relationship should be, even on a more professional level. Because I do think that I know that we want to have, we want to be able to put our people first, but at the same time, like we need to be able to recover and take care of our own needs. And then there is a level of professionalism. So there are still boundaries that are appropriate to set in the workplace. And I think that's figuring out what those boundaries are for you and how you set that is kind of how you approach that kind of problem.
That's a great answer to a very challenging question. Well, it's been such an inspiring hour. I feel like time just flew by. And so I'd really like to thank Emily, Patricia, Cynthia, all of you for your leadership, your insights, and really your candor for sharing all the thoughts that you had with us today. Now I'll hand it back to Joy to close us out.
Thank you, Julia, for such great facilitation and really kind of pulling out some of the key points that we all talked about. I think just a reflection, listening to the answers, I think each of you came with so much honesty and gave really specific examples, and just in the way you responded to these questions and interacted with us you really embodied some of those characteristics that you had identified in the beginning of what leadership looks like. So really appreciate all the time that you spent today, all the preparation that you made in formulating responses and collaborating with us to do this event. It looks like we're trying to get a survey out. If you could just take a few minutes to complete the survey, that will help inform us of what kind of events we want to do going forward. And please stay in touch with us. Follow us on social media, not just New Energy Nexus, but also Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, Momentum. Thank you, Cynthia, Emily, and Patricia for taking your time today. We'll work on getting the survey link corrected and working, and we'll probably send that in a follow-up email. And in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us today.